Hello and welcome to video 3 of character rigging. So we fixed, we created some joints, we named our joints, and we showed our local rotation axis. Now we have to fix things. So what we are going to do is first I'm going to hit F, kind of zoom in on this. Let's hit Alt B. I think this is a little bit easier to see everything. And next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to basically unparent everything. So Shift P, unparent. Well, fortunately, we named everything, so it's going to be all right. And the reason we're unparenting our joints is because when we move our local rotation axes over here, we don't want to move all the rest of these joints. That would be not great. So the key here is we always want the x-axis to be pointing towards the next joint down the line. And we want it pointing towards it perfectly. But you'll notice that we have our z-axis and it's pointing in one direction here, it's pointing in another direction there. So the first joint that we really have to fix is we are going to have to fix our knee joint. Let me just go to the channels real quick to take a look at my character. All right, looks like the leg is, it's positioned pretty well. It's pretty straight ahead. So I don't think we really need to rotate the ankle any. So that's good. One less thing, but let's fix our friend here, the knee joint. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a locator. So if you go to create a locator, you will see one. And I'm going to select it and I'm going to press V. So I talked about pressing X, and that's snapping to the grid. Pressing V will snap to vertices and it will snap to joints. This is why our model is in template mode. Because when we press V, what we don't want, so if this was, this is in reference mode, but you can see I'm just like snapping to a whole bunch of vertices. That's not what we want. So we want it in template mode so that we can snap instead to our joint and we're not fighting with anything else. Once we do that, we're going to move our locator over in the x-axis only to the my right, the character's left of the leg. Then what we are going to do is we're going to select our character's knee joint and we're going to zero out all the joint orient options. Okay, so we're going to zero everything out. Then what we're going to do is we're going to select here our ankle joint, shift select the knee joint, and we're going to go to constrain aim options box, and we're going to edit reset settings just to do that. So what is an aim constraint? An aim constraint, we're going to be telling the computer, we're going to say, hey, we want this up vector to reposition basically the z-axis. Let me put the 0. I believe it should be pointing in the -1. And we want the world up type to be object up because the object is going to be our locator 1. And then we're going to hit, let's zoom in so we can see this a little bit better. Let's also like make the character this invisible. So let's zoom in here. And if all is well, this will be pointing down, the Z will be pointing inward, and the Y will be pointing up. And voila, that's exactly what happened. So now we see the X is pointing down perfectly to our ankle joint. The Y is, it's pointing forward, and the Z is pointing out to the side. So the Y is pointing forward, but it is pointing correctly. All right, but we have an issue here because we have a constraint attached to our rotate values, and that is a big old mess. Let's go to our attribute editor and fix that up. So we're going to go to our knee here, and we're going to delete the constraint. We only needed the constraint to fix our local rotation axes. The next thing that we are going to do is we are going to transfer these rotate values down to the joint orient values. It's why we deleted all of the joint orient values before we set the aim constraint. So I'm going to select my rotate X value. Sorry about that. That was my phone. I apologize. Let me just mute that. All right. So I'm going to select rotate X and Control X to cut, type in 0, Control V to paste. Control X to cut in my rotate Y, type in 0, and in joint orient Y, Control V to paste. And then in rotate Z, Control X to cut, type in 0, and Control V to paste. So now, what did I do? Let's go back. Something didn't get transferred properly. Or maybe it did and it's just not updating. Let's try this again. Control X, type in 0, Control V. Maybe I didn't hit enter. Control X, type in 0, Control V. No. That is, oh, yeah. So this should be 0, and this should be 0. I thought I already put 0 in there, but for some reason it repopulated. So, and I also unchecked segment scale compensate, and it's still not going in the right direction. Oh, there it is. Let me make sure you keep segment scale compensate checked on, but double check up here in rotate. Now listen, guys. Rigging, there's always some issues going on. So if an issue occurs with me, this is actually a really good thing because it is, it's a way to learn, all right? There's constant ways that your rig can break, and so you're going to have to use a lot of critical thinking to figure out why things might have gone wrong. I always think of rigging like baking and all the other functions in Maya, like cooking. So if you kind of know flavor profiles and things like that, when you cook, you usually can make something that's fairly good. But in baking, baking is closer to chemistry. And if you don't know what you're doing, you can make horrible things that are inedible and nobody wants, right? But if you know the basic chemical formulas to create like fluffy pancakes or soft cookies or crunchy cookies, and so on and so forth, then you can experiment and really create some wonderful treats. And that's kind of the same with rigging. Once you kind of know what the constraints do and really the flow of how to rig the correct kind of steps, you can make some amazing rigs. So if things go wrong, it's just a learning, it's a way to learn. And in Maya, it does occur. All right, so we got rid of all our rotate values and we put them down to the joint orient values. And as you can see, our Z is pointing inward, the X is pointing down towards my joint, and the Y is pointing out. All right, so that's great. So let's look at this other one, and it looks good. Let's go to the side view and just double check so we're in the right view. And indeed, it looks like it's pointing directly to my last joint. I'm going to hit P to parent to reparent them. I am going to reparent, it lets me, my ankle to my knee. So remember, you select the child first, and then you select the parent. Let's go into perspective view. We're going to select our ball joint, which looks to be positioned properly, and reparent. And we're going to reparent the end joint. And I know it looks a mess. It doesn't look right. But the end joint is actually really easy. So even though it's not correct, we don't have to use a locator to fix it. We're going to use this RJT tool, which reorients all selected joints. You can also go to Skeleton, Orient Joint tool, click the options box, and orient the joint to world. So either one of these works, okay? That one, you just go to the skeleton window and go orient joint, options box, make sure it's in world, or you can click the RJT tool, which is on our shelf. And now we have oriented our entire joint chain correctly, and we can see that there are no orientation values on anything. There should not be. So if I look at my actual rotate channel, I do not see any rotation values. I'm going to save. Now that I fixed my X, Y, and Z axis, let's get rid of that locator for now. I need to add an IK handle. So this is going to allow my character to move. Now, before you make IK handles, when you're building your joint chain, you want to make sure that whatever direction you want your knee or elbow or whatever to bend, there's a slight bend in that direction. Otherwise, Maya has to decide in which direction it's going to bend, and that can lead to some weirdness. So we are going to click Create IK Handle Options box, and let's reset our tool. And we want to make sure that we are on Rotate Plane Solver, not Single Plane Chain Solver, but Rotate Plane Solver, okay? We are going to click once on our hip and once on our ankle, and we now have an IK handle. So this is our little IK handle. Check this out. Cool. And I'm going to hit Z to undo, put it back to default. We're going to name it, and we're going to call it RP, which stands for Rotate Plane Solver, RP_L_IK01. So we know this is a Rotate Plane Solver IK on the left-hand side. All right, so let's make our character visible, and then we are going to make our life a lot easier by, instead of remaking all these joints from scratch, we are going to mirror them. Yay! So what we are going to do is we are going to go to Skeleton Mirror Joints Options box. I'm going to reset settings. I want to make sure I mirror across in YZ. I'm going to search for _L_ and replace with _R_. And that means it's going to rename everything for me. I don't have to rename anything. Make sure your mirror function is behavior and click mirror. So now when we've done this, our joints are perfectly mirrored. You'll notice that the local rotation axes are going in opposite directions. That's okay. We actually want that, because when we move our legs, let's say our character was doing jumping jacks, we want his legs to go in opposite directions of one another. If we had not chosen behavior, if we chose the other option, the legs would then be moving like in the same direction. So if you want to do your jumping jacks, your character could never do jumping jacks. So we want them going in the opposite direction. It's great. The only thing we do need to rename here is our, no, we don't. So our IK handle on the right is named properly. Our IK handle on the left is named properly. And we have both of our hips, which is fantastic. And they are all named properly. If I hit shift, click the plus sign, it opens the whole thing. Uh-oh, there's one thing we need to name. And this is something called an effector. It's always invisible, but it is there. And if you have a lot of IKs, you're going to have a lot of effectors. So I'm going to double click on my effector one here and go EFF_L_leg01. And we're going to do the same on the other side, EFF_R_leg01. And we are going to save. And lastly, we're going to turn off our local rotation axes. So if you left mouse drag, you will select your entire joint chain. And then if you hit LRA on your shelf, it will turn off your local rotation axes for every single joint. All right, that's it for video 3. Until next time, this is Mayette. Bye-bye.